Climate Targets panel has found that for Australia to do its share in meeting the Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees, a tipping point beyond which climate change becomes unstoppable, we would need emissions cuts of at least 50% by 2030. Will you now lift Australia's 2030 targets before Joe Biden's April 22 summit and join the rest of the world in fighting what the President says is an existential threat? Or will you stick with your paltry 2030 targets that are based on Australia warming by over 4 degrees and becoming largely uninhabitable during our children's lifetimes?
Members on my right, the Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The member may know that in 2020 we beat our targets for Kyoto by some 459 million tonnes. The member may know that in 2019-20 emissions were 3% lower than in 18-19, and emissions, Mr Speaker, are now 16.6% below 2005 levels, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the government is committed to our Paris targets, and we will achieve them, and I believe we will beat them, Mr Speaker. And the way we will beat them will not be by any other method other than ensuring that we are investing in the technological changes that are necessary to continue to successfully transform our economy. Now, not just our economy, because as indeed Special Envoy Biden said, the United States could cut their emissions to zero tomorrow and it wouldn't solve the problem. Mr Speaker, what we need around the world is the technological transformation that has as bigger impact in this country and the United States and Europe and the United Kingdom that it can also have in China, in India, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, Mr Speaker.
The Prime Minister will resume his seat. The Leader of the Greens on a point of order.
On relevance, the question wasn't how or whether the targets are going to be met. It was whether the 2030 targets are going to be lifted, and the Prime Minister has not addressed that.
I just say to the Leader of the Greens, as I've said many times for those asking questions, certainly there were 2 questions there, but as I've said ad nauseum, if there's a long quotation at the start or a long statement at the start, the Prime Minister is entitled to address that as well. To avoid that, you simply just need to state a clear, short, sharp question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, but I note the point that the member for Melbourne just made. He's not interested in the how, Mr Speaker. He's not interested in the how. I'm interested in the how, Mr Speaker. I'm interested how we get to net zero, Mr Speaker, as soon as possible and preferably by 2050. I'm interested in how we get there, Mr Speaker, because if you don't get there by technology, you get there by taxes, Mr Speaker. And I will never put a cost on Australians for getting to net zero by 2050. I see us getting to net zero, Mr Speaker, by transformational technology that keeps the jobs in our regions, Mr Speaker, that keeps the jobs in our heavy industries, Mr Speaker, that provides a future for all of those workers, particularly across regional Australia. That's what we're investing in, Mr Speaker. Our 2030 targets are very clear. I took them to the last election and they are endorsed by the Australian people, Mr Speaker. I call on others to nominate what their 2030 targets are, Mr Speaker, because I think that would be very important for the people of Australia to know before the election next year.